Why rope flow boosts your focus. The science explained his hands wouldn't stop shaking during the morning meeting. Same coffee, same routine, but his mind was somewhere else entirely, scattered across a dozen half-finished thoughts. He'd been like this for months, forgetting names mid-conversation, losing his train of thought while typing emails, staring at his screen for 20 minutes without absorbing a single word. Just stress, everyone said. You need a vacation. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. His attention had become fragile, like trying to hold water in his hands. One Saturday morning, scrolling through videos he'd never remember watching, something caught his eye. A woman moving a rope in fluid, hypnotic patterns. It looked almost meditative, like Tai Chi, but with rhythm. Rope flow, the caption read. He almost kept scrolling. But something about the movement stopped him. The way her body seemed to disappear into the motion. The quietness in her face, despite the speed of her hands. Maybe it was desperation, maybe curiosity. But 2 days later, he found himself in his garage with a weighted rope he'd ordered online, feeling slightly ridiculous. The first attempt was chaos. The rope tangled around his wrist. He tripped over his own feet. His neighbor probably thought he'd lost it. But there was something oddly satisfying about the failure. For the first time in weeks, his mind wasn't trying to be 3 places at once. It was right there, frustrated, focused, fully present. He didn't know it yet, but his brain was already starting to change. Neuroscientists at UCLA have studied what happens when we engage in rhythmic cross-body movement, the kind that requires both hemispheres to coordinate in real time. The rope creates something called bilateral integration. When rhythmic movement requires cooperation, attention, and spatial awareness, the brain starts activating pathways it doesn't normally use during routine tasks. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning and decision-making, suddenly has to sync with your motor cortex, your visual system, and your sense of balance, all at once. He didn't understand any of that yet. He just knew that after 5 minutes of fumbling, he felt ... calmer. Not in the passive way meditation promised. This was different. His mind wasn't empty. It was focused, present, locked into the rhythm of the rope. Maybe this is just distraction, he thought, a temporary break from the noise. But what he couldn't feel was the chemistry changing inside his brain. Research on rope jumping found elevated levels of norepinephrine metabolites, the neurotransmitters directly tied to attention and alertness. The same chemicals your brain releases when something urgent demands your focus. Except in this case, there was no crisis, just movement, just rhythm. His brain was learning to activate attention pathways without stress as the trigger. Week 2, something shifted. He wasn't thinking about the rope anymore. His body had memorized the timing, the weight of the rope, the micro-adjustments in his wrists. And suddenly, he noticed things he hadn't before. The sound of the rope cutting through air, the way his breathing naturally synced with the rotation, the quiet hum of presence. For someone who spent most of his day drowning in mental static, this was revelatory. What would you do if your mind finally stopped racing? Not through force, not through discipline, but through rhythm. He started noticing changes outside the garage, too. Meetings felt less overwhelming. He could hold a thought long enough to finish expressing it. Names stuck, details registered. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. His colleague asked him what changed. He laughed and said, "I've been jumping rope." She looked at him like he'd lost it. Maybe he had. But he also felt more like himself than he had in months. There's a concept in neuroscience called flow state. That feeling when you're so absorbed in an activity that time disappears. Athletes talk about it. Artists live for it. Most people think flow only happens during peak performance, when you're at your best, but research shows something different. Flow experiences correlate with learning progress and task engagement, not perfection. Your brain craves growth, not mastery. Rope flow sits perfectly in that zone, complex enough to demand focus, simple enough to improve quickly. Every session you get better, and your brain rewards you for it. Then came the injury, a sprained ankle from an unrelated weekend hike, 2 weeks off movement. 2 weeks back in his head, the mental fog returned almost immediately. The scattered thoughts, the restless energy with nowhere to go. He realized how much the practice had been anchoring him. Not just physically, neurologically, even a single 3-minute session of rope work can lead to brain states associated with cognitive learning benefits. His brain had been training itself to regulate attention. And without that daily reset, the old patterns crept back in. Sometimes we only understand what supports us when it's taken away. When he finally returned to the garage, rope in hand, it felt different. Not like exercise, like coming home. The first few rotations were clumsy. His timing was off. But within minutes, something clicked. His breath steadied, his mind quieted. The world narrowed to the arc of the rope and the rhythm of his feet. He wasn't just moving his body, he was recalibrating his nervous system. Rope flow isn't just rhythmic, it's cross-lateral, when both sides of the body work together in opposition, like coordinating the right arm with the left leg. The corpus callosum connecting the brain's hemispheres becomes more developed. That bridge between left and right brain, it strengthens. Information flows faster. Your brain becomes more integrated. Coordinated bilateral movements engage both hemispheres, activating the cerebellum and prefrontal cortex, the very areas responsible for executive function, emotional regulation, and problem-solving. No wonder his scattered thoughts were starting to settle. He began experimenting. Different patterns, different speeds, adding complexity just to see if he could stay present. And here's what he noticed. The harder the pattern, the quieter his mind became. It wasn't meditation, it was challenge. Contained manageable challenge that demanded every ounce of his attention. His brain stopped wandering because it had nowhere else to go. A 10-week rope-based intervention showed improvements in both motor coordination and selective attention accuracy in children. But this wasn't just about kids. Adults were experiencing the same cognitive shifts. Better focus, faster mental processing, improved ability to filter distractions. The practice was rewiring how their brains allocated attention. By month 3, rope flow had become non-negotiable. Not because he had to do it, because everything felt harder without it. His mornings began in the garage. 10 minutes, sometimes 15. Just him, the rope, and the rhythm. And on days when work felt overwhelming, when his inbox was drowning him, he'd step outside. 3 minutes, reset, return. It became his reset button. Not an escape, a recalibration. His wife noticed too. "You seem ... calmer," she said one evening. "More like yourself," he laughed. "I'm just jumping rope." But they both knew it was more than that. What surprised me most wasn't just how a good weighted rope improved my experience with rope flow, but how everything started to feel different once I switched to the right method. I wasn't expecting such a clear change, and honestly, I tested it more than a few times before I figured out what really worked. This isn't a promotion, just sharing real results that made a noticeable difference for me. I'll leave the link below if you want to explore what I mean. There's something humbling about learning movement as an adult, about returning to your body after years of living entirely in your head. He'd spent decades believing productivity meant more focus, more discipline, more control. But rope flow taught him something different. Focus isn't forced. It's cultivated, through rhythm, through presence, through showing up, even when you're clumsy. One afternoon, his daughter asked if she could try. He handed her the rope, expecting her to give up after a few tangles, but she didn't. She kept going, laughing when she tripped, adjusting, trying again. "It's harder than it looks," she said, breathless. "Everything worth doing is," he replied. "The science might explain what's happening in the brain. The neurotransmitters, the hemispheric integration, the attentional networks lighting up like a circuit board," but standing there, watching his daughter move the rope in wobbly circles, he realized something the research couldn't capture. Focus isn't just a cognitive skill, it's a state of being, a felt sense of connection to your body, to the present moment, to the simple truth that you're here, now alive. And sometimes, all it takes is a rope and the willingness to show up. He still struggles with focus. Some days are better than others, but now, when his mind starts to scatter, he knows what to do. Not through willpower, not through caffeine or productivity hacks, through movement, through rhythm, through the quiet intelligence of his own nervous system, finally given permission to reset. When he looks in the mirror now, it's not his reflection that has changed, it's what he believes about his own capacity to be present. This is educational information, not medical advice. If you're experiencing persistent attention difficulties, please consult a healthcare professional. Tell us what part of this story resonated most and where you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.